What a pleasure for me to be here. I was glad when the Reverend took time to introduce couples. I am one of those also who is a couple. He is not here today, but Anne will tell you that when I joined the university in 1987, I was determined not only to live with a degree, but also with a husband. I succeeded. And therefore, by way of introduction, I am Mrs. Nyaundi. My husband was my classmate. That can tell you where my focus was. The Reverend has also indicated to you that I have some association with the churches. I am a granddaughter of an Anglican. My grandparents, maternal, Anglican, and therefore my early years were spent in an Anglican congregation. When my mother married, she took to heart Ruth's words, which are, "My people will be your people, your God will be my God." And so because she married a Catholic, I was raised Catholic. When I found my husband, I followed my mother's example and joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so as I stand here, I have coursing through my veins Anglicanism, Catholicism, and SDAism. I pray that with that experience, God will use me this morning. The other comment I'd like to make is that lawyers, as you know, will be the lasting profession. They are the ones that will survive to the end of times. Because the last thing that will happen will be judgment. I was therefore glad to see a number of them singing, because we are assured that we will be represented in the heavenly choir. What a delight to be here. I am truly honored, because when I look in the congregation, not all faces are new. And so I am delighted to say that I already feel at home. The first reading was drawn from Isaiah 58. And this being a Justice or Freedom Sunday, the focus of my reflection would be Isaiah 58 and verse 6 and 7, where the word of God says, "Is this not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you may break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh." One of the things that I delight about being a Christian and the scripture that guides us is that our God does not gloss over. Our God does not conceal anything. No conversation is too difficult. You know, sometimes in families, when we feel that speaking about this thing will fracture the family further, we silence it. But almost everywhere in his word, God reveals to us that he is big enough to take any question that we might have. Anything that might be troubling us, our God is big enough to answer us. And so here in Isaiah 58, beginning with verse 1, we find the children of Israel troubled. And their trouble is found in verse 3, where they ask God, because our God is big enough, He can never be shaken by our questions. And the children of Israel, they ask him, why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen? God, why is it that we have come before you? We have given of ourselves to your cause. But when we look at our circumstances, it is not obvious to us that you are responding to our petitions. You know, sometimes in our earthly parents, you cannot ask this question. At least if you had a father like mine or a mother like mine, it would be a very dangerous thing to walk up to them and challenge them. But our God can take it. And so the children of Israel challenge God and say, God, we are in your service. We are offering ourselves to you. If it was this congregation, they would be saying to God, God, we give you a tithe. We give you a generous offering. We visit the sick. We have built this sanctuary. But why is it that our circumstances do not reflect the service that we have given you? And God is saying there is something about the way that you are conducting yourselves that I find unacceptable. There is a way in which you are presenting yourselves when I look at you, and I find it completely unacceptable. And so, my people, I am unable to respond. What a fearful thing that we can present ourselves to God. And because of the things going around us, our God, who tells us that he is a loving God, who has given us his only Son, says, I am sorry. I have got to turn my back to you. I have got to turn a deaf ear to you. And God in verse 6 says, the reason I have to turn my back to you, O children of Israel, is because you tolerate injustice. Is because you look away from injustice. It reminds me of a story in the Bible that is found in Luke chapter 10. A rich, and may I say, lawyer, walks up to Jesus full of confidence, and he says, what can I do to be saved? And Jesus says to him, keep the commandments. And he says, those ones I have kept. All of them, I have kept them. And then Jesus says, so Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbor. And the ruler says, but who is my neighbor? And this leads to the parable of the Good Samaritan. We know it. My brothers and my sisters, when we tolerate injustice, it is when, as the English say, we hide in public view. Do you know the ridiculousness of that? That something is hidden, yet it is in public view. So it is there, but you do not see it. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan, we have, the story begins in Luke chapter 10, verse 30. Jesus says, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves. I have heard this story recounted that this man ought to have known that this was a dangerous road. You know, so it is like if you are attacked on River Road, if your phone is stolen at Luthuli Avenue and you report, people will say, What's wrong with you? Why were you holding your phone publicly along River Road? Okay? Ukiwekwa Ngeta at around 8 p.m., people will be, what were you doing out? Isn't it? Common sense is not so common. So this man, people would say he got his deservance. He was left wounded, ready to die. The first person to pass by was a priest. What did he do? From a distance, when he saw the wounded man, he passed by the other side. The Bible is deliberate in verse 31. We cannot defend him. In verse 31, the Bible records, he saw him, wounded, left for dead. And what is the decision he made as a priest? He would pass the other side. Verse 32, a Levite, when he arrived at the place, we can assume it is the place where this gentleman was lying wounded, half dead. He came, he looked, but quickly went the other side. He probably collected a story that he was going to tell his friends at the end of his journey. The Bible then records in verse 33, but, what a powerful word, but. A certain Samaritan, one who was not expected. In modern day, we would call them activists. You know, those busybodies. As he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. We heard Mama Milka when she was speaking, and she said people she knew, people within her hearing, people who observed that the person who was being lowered into the grave was her son. People uttered in her hearing that she gave birth to a thief. How painful. But I thank God that this Samaritan had compassion. What did he do? He went to this wounded man, bandaged his wounds, poured oil and wine, and set him on his animal. Those who have been on that part of the world will tell you it's a very rugged cliff. And so, in saving this man, the Samaritan endangered his own life because he chose to walk by the animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And when he had satisfied himself that his condition had stabilized, on the next day, when he departed, he took 2 denarii. I think this must have been around 20 to 50,000 in our modern time, gave it to the innkeeper and said, take care of him. Whatever you need, spend. When I come, if you have exhausted this, I will pay you. And Jesus asked the question, which of these 3 do you think is a neighbor? My brothers, my sisters, I think the challenge, and especially in our country, is that we have normalized injustice. In fact, we are surprised when there is justice. We have normalized. It is now normal, my brothers and sisters, to find that a couple has come to court, and what is their dispute? Who should educate their children? And one parent is resisting and is abusing the justice system to ensure that the case drags on. We have normalized the fact that for a child to get maintenance from their parent, they will begin from the children court, it will be appealed to the High Court, it will go to the Court of Appeal and find its way to the Supreme Court. That is normal. We have normalized the fact that a widow, while she is laying her husband to rest, when she turns back from her grave, will find people wrestling with her for wealth that was accumulated with her husband. We have normalized the fact that heirs of an estate will take 20 years for their matter to be concluded. And that is when they have paid expensive lawyers. Woe unto them if they find their way unaccompanied by a lawyer into the court. They will die. Their grandchildren will come to take over those issues, and even their great-grandchildren. That is normal. It does not raise an eyebrow. We have normalized the fact that after so many years of marriage, a woman can be kicked out. Nowadays, we don't have green paper bags because of the campaign. But she will be kicked out with a what's the supermarket? Naivas. You know that one that looks like a gunia? And she'll be told, out, get out. And like me, probably she has gray hairs. And it will take her 10 years fighting to get back into what she calls the matrimonial home. She will walk to court while her spouse drives to court, and the only intention is to adjourn that case. We have normalized that. And so we are comfortable to deal with those issues that God has told us in Ephesians 5, how we should live as a family. Submit to your husband, love your wife, do not vex your children. Those issues are now the subject of litigation in our courts, and we are comfortable. We have normalized. It is okay. We have normalized the fact that a young child, be it a girl or a boy, can be sexually abused. Any age will do. From 3 months to 18, we have normalized it. And when the perpetrator is brought to court, we will accommodate the fact that it was probably malice. It was a rent dispute or something like that. And we will accommodate. And this child will come to court waiting to be heard. Several adjournments. A child who was sexually molested coming to court and not getting their hearing. 2-3 years. I am told in Kenya, if you come to court and your matter is concluded in a year, you come here and give a testimony. And people will say, ulitoa kitu kidogo, ulipeana chai, and I don't mean ketepa. It is normal in Kenya that if you make the mistake of seeking justice, and the pun is intended, of seeking, those stories also do not end so well. Have you ever heard the woman who comes crying sometimes to church and saying, I am being treated, I don't know whether some of you have experience with how you treat millet when you are preparing it. You're not gentle with it, are you? When you want to prepare millet and you're, and this woman reports, I'm being treated like millet in my house. And the response she's given is that the church does not look too well on divorce. Go home. A foolish woman breaks her home with her own hands. Go home and learn to treat him better. Okay? They are shocking stories. Some girls have run to their mothers and said, Mommy, after a year, 6 months, 2 years of marriage, says, Mommy, it's not working. And Mommy says, you see your father here? This is how we have lived. Wanaume ni hivyo. You go home and be at peace. There was a time that these stories used to end very sadly, when you would end up burying couples and leaving HIV/AIDS orphans. I think that is when some sanity came in. My own parents, who live in Bungoma, in recent times, have told me of their own frustrations. Somebody, while they are asleep, goes to their shamba, and while my mother is dreaming about sweet potatoes for breakfast, somebody is harvesting them in the night. The other day, somebody walked away with a cow. I picked up the phone and thought, I just need to drop my title and that cow will be found. Because I thought a whole cow. When I spoke to the person whose assistance I sought, they said to me, siku hizi ni hivyo. I was speaking to a law enforcement officer. And the law enforcement officer told me, siku hizi ni hivyo. Vijana wanabeba vitu ya watu. Tumeshindwa. I got a tight knot in my stomach, a cold feeling. I said, where are we headed? These are difficult times. And you know what makes it more difficult? Is that right now, the state of the world is that your natural instinct is to be self-absorbed. You went to sleep when fuel was 170. You wake up when it is 210. Where are you going to get the space to listen to me and my sweet potato story? In as much as I am aggrieved, when you're buying bread for 100 shillings and you have teenagers who consume it and look at you hungrily, like, is that all you had to offer? When your month is longer than your salary? Where are you going to get the bandwidth to care about your neighbor? And it would be easier if your neighbor's issue was as simple as asking for salt. You know, I am glad that in all this, at least salt has remained cheap. But the truth of the matter is that when we are talking about justice, we are not talking about simple issues. God requires us to behave like this Samaritan, not only to observe and empathize and pull out your handkerchief and wipe the tear, but God requires that you get your hands dirty. God requires that when you get to your bed and you are thinking of sleeping, you stay awake thinking about Mama Milka and the son she has had to bury. And asking yourself, will I leave her here by the roadside, or will I bandage her wounds? Is it enough for me to bandage her wounds, or should I place her on my animal, take her away from the danger, and take her to the safety of an inn? Is it enough that I leave her at the inn, or should I meet the costs of the intervention? And after I have met the cost of the intervention, I should be concerned about the outcome. Christianity is not cheap. Someone has said, if your Christianity does not make you uncomfortable, does not cause you anxiety, then you're playing church. Those things we used to do in my generation, we used to call kalongo. And I could behave like my mother, but I was never my mother. Don't play church. Do not play church. That is what God is talking to the Israelites in Isaiah 58. He's saying, I can't listen to you. I cannot listen to you when the cry of the oppressed is rising up to heaven. And like the Levite and the priest, you cross the road and walk on the other way. I have a demand for you today. This is the fast. You know, a fast is a denial, not only of food, but any other comfort that you have. And so God is saying, this is how I want you to deny yourself the comfort. I want you to be disturbed by the injustices that are happening around you. And I want you to contribute to their solution. I want you to make sure that no one who is within the sphere of your influence will remain within the bonds of wickedness. I want you to make sure that no one is carrying a heavy burden. I want you to make sure that no one is oppressed. And I want you to make sure that every yoke is broken. I am so glad that for God, his callings are enablings. God assures us that whenever he calls us to serve him, he will provide. This is why Moses, with a staff, was able to part the Red Sea and lead the children of Israel into Canaan. And this is why Caleb, at the age of 85, was able to conquer a mountain. This is why Hannah, who was barren, was able in her old age to bring forth a son. And likewise Sarah. We serve a God of impossibilities. We serve a God who is limitless in the resources that he gives his children. Don't you marvel at a God who fed the children of Israel manna for the 40 years that they were in captivity. And on the very day that they crossed the Jordan, the manna stopped. Our God will supply your every need according to his riches in glory. May God bless you as you commit yourself to serve him in ensuring that there shall be no tears of pain within the circle of your influence. God bless you.